Jay, Brian, thanks for joining me for this very special episode. I think there's about 35 people in the live stream. I got to say, when I announced this yesterday, I don't think I've gotten this much just replies and comments and likes, and it was all over the spectrum. And so, yeah, I think this is going to be really interesting. First of all, how are you doing, Jay? Oh, sorry, you've been muted. Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good as always. There's always a lot going on. It seems just everywhere, and I'm trying to stay centered through it all. And it's a nice exercise and staying centered through a storm. And there's always been storms, right? So here's another one, but I think this will be good.
Yeah. Someone just mentioned in the live stream that I was muted during the intro. Is that possible?
Could you guys hear me all I could hear was music. I was very confused. It's like, what's going on? It's like I hear this music, and then
oh damn. Okay, yeah. So I was muted for the intro.
I heard you for the intro.
Oh, okay, that's weird.
I just heard music.
Well, I'm still figuring out the software, but yeah. So I think the last time we chatted was at Interchain Conversations in Berlin in 2019, I think. What have you been working on since then, and what's been sort of the arc of Jae Kwon since that time?
Yeah. So here's a gist. So during the COVID lockdowns, right? I started honestly, admittedly panicking because I saw COVID, and there was an article stating that I was the first ones talking about it, and also proposing that it may be true that it came from a lab, which, by the way, seems like there's enough consensus on, although you don't really hear it in the news, but if you look for it, the facts are all out there with whistleblowers. But yeah, so I moved to Oregon for a bit. I thought, hey, I need to go to live in some farmland, and then when they started pushing vaccines, experimental vaccines, rushed to children who the data shows doesn't need it, I started to realize that there's something more going on. And I started diving straight into a bunch of rabbit holes. And I was in some rabbit holes before, but this made me just dive into some. I kind of surveyed all the rabbit holes. I mean, like literally all of them, and came out kind of, more confused, but definitely understanding some greater picture, and it made me realize that we absolutely need a different kind of platform where people can discuss these facts and theories without fear of censorship, where the system is flexible enough to experiment with different moderation techniques, different techniques of truth discovery, of weighing facts, of all these things. Because what's going on right now is the most of media, including major tech platforms, are completely, for a while at least, and it's getting a little better, but it's still true. They're all censored, right? And it seems like the censorship is causing real truth to be blocked from public view. And And it's not good, because on the one hand, we need to moderate information, but on the other hand, what this is being used as, this all these conspiracy theories that are not true, half truths and dangerous lies, all of these things are being promoted to justify the censorship of information that we do need to know about. And so I've been working on this project called No Land. And it's a different kind of smart contract platform. It's based on Go, the language, and it uses a different virtual machine, a novel virtual machine that the world has never quite seen before, that allows you to basically at any moment pause a program and continue it, Merkleize the entire state in memory. And what that means is, you can program smart contracts in Go in the most succinct way, as if the computer that is running the Go program, the smart contract, will never shut down. So the memory, the RAM memory, becomes persistent, and this opens new ways of programming that preserves the features of the language, enables modularity through the features of the language, while removing a lot of complexity about programming today, not just in WebAssembly based smart contracts, but also just programming in general. Honestly, I think what this virtual machine does is it opens doors to programming paradigms, even in the non-blockchain Web 2.0 space, that we should really explore.
Let's explore it. So we actually had first, we thought about talking about AiB 2.0 first, but I think since you already started on this topic, and admittedly both Brian and I only have a high level understanding of No. Let's dive into why it's so different from the current paradigm, and so the virtual machine paradigm that we're familiar with in Ethereum smart contracts and Cosmos Watson smart contracts, and also the Cosmos SDK paradigm of having an SDK with modules that are pre-written and pre-compiled for specific applications. So how does No depart from what most people are familiar with in terms of writing applications on a blockchain?
Mm-hmm. I'd say that the best smart contract system that is in production today is Ethereum Solidity, because in the sense that what it allows you to do is to create a very short script, a very short program, contract code, upload it. So it's just one transaction to upload a single file, and that's it. And anything you program using Solidity is deterministic. So you're not going to get very strange bugs that you would otherwise get if you were to have to program it into Cosmos SDK. So determinism is one thing. If you want to program into Cosmos SDK, you have to program it in a certain way to ensure that everything is deterministic, no matter what different environment or instance of the program you're running in. And it's a bit difficult. It's possible, but still difficult. And we've seen bugs because of non-determinism. The other major thing is, if you see how the Cosmos SDK always passes a context around, you don't have to do that anymore. And part of what the context object in the SDK is used for is to load and persist objects, right? So we have these structures in Go, your business model, user or governance proposal, vote, all of these things. And every time you run a transaction, you have to load these objects from the store, deserialize them into objects from bytes, and then do your logic, and then turn them back into bytes, and then put them back into store. It's this persistence paradigm, which comes really from Web 2.0 too, right? Is necessary because honestly, because we don't have the machine. We don't even have the right physical machine to do this. We will in the future with memristors, but that's another story. But what the NoLand VM allows you to do is to forget about persistence, because you no longer have to store anything on disk, because anything that is in memory is already persisted. Very different concept.
So I think probably a lot of people are going to be like struggling with, sort of what does that mean and like why does it matter? Can you talk about, in the end, right, from somebody using a smart contract application on NoLand, like what are the benefits that are going to kind of translate to the user or to the developer, maybe?
I'll say two major things. One is it's very easy to understand NoLand smart contracts. You can, even right now, if you go to test2.gno.land, and you can browse through to the board's smart contract, which is kind of like a little subreddit. It's just a demonstration, but you can see the code. And you'll see that there's only a few files there. It really could be condensed into a single file. And everything is you don't have to understand anything about a different platform. You don't have to understand a new paradigm. You can, anyone who understands Go can see these files and immediately understand what's going on. So it's the intuitiveness, right? That's new. And the other thing is because it's so it's so integrated with the language. Modularity becomes, something that is very accessible. And what I mean is, with if you're going to program a smart contract in Rust, which compiles to WebAssembly, for example, like you're gonna have to deal with messages being passed around, right? And so you have to understand a new paradigm of message passing, whereas in NoLand, in NoLang, the virtual machine, it's just the language features that you already know in Go. You import a package from a different place. It could even be a different blockchain. Maybe we'll go into that later. And you embed the structure in the parent structure, and that's it. The language features are provided for you as the basis for constructing your smart contracts, and it makes it all very simple. And another thing to mention is that in the long run, so like the virtual machine as it is right now, it's an interpreter. It's implemented in Go. It's good enough for production, but in the long run, as we optimize this thing, it will enable energy savings too, because you don't have to do a lot of things that you would otherwise have to do, say, in the Cosmos SDK. Anyways.
So basically, if I can sort of maybe rephrase what you're saying, right? So, okay, the simplicity of the smart contracts and the benefit of that might be security, because it's easier to spot flaws if things are simple. And maybe also from user security, or like, other people can easier analyze the smart contract and know what's going on. And then maybe sort of the barrier to entry, that like developers can more easily learn the thing and create smart contracts is.
It'll open. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It'll reduce the size of a team needed to create an application by an order of magnitude. It will increase by an order of magnitude the amount of developers who can program the smart contract this thing at all, and several orders of magnitude in terms of people who understand the entire stack, because it's all written in Go and it's about Go. Yeah.
So what about IBC compatibility here, and compatibility with the existing Cosmos SDK and CosmWasm paradigm? Can you address, talk about how GNO fits into all of this?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about our plans, right? So these might change, but this is This is how I think we should move forward with no land. So first of all, we want there to be a minimal token hub. That's the reason why I'm pushing for Atom 1, which I hope we get into very soon. Because no land doesn't want to compete with the Cosmos hub for token pegged transfers. I think that's a problem that needs a specialized solution, token pegging, token transfers, and the thing that Atom 1 is trying to solve, because the entire crypto ecosystem needs it, and it's important to get right. So we should pool our security into making a very secure thing, and then innovate upon there. There can be more hubs, but we should get one hub right.
Sorry, what do you mean by token peg transfers?
Yeah, what I mean is IBC connecting to zones. The IBC currently in the Cosmos Hub is used for transferring tokens, right? It can be used for other things too, like smart contract calls across chains. So I'll paint an example. Another thing that IBC will be used for no land is besides connecting to the Cosmos Hub for token transfers, is to connect to other chains who want to import code from no land. So we want to allow other chains, many chains, to benefit from and to use the no land virtual machine, but also the code that is hosted on no land. So you can import, on another chain, say, node.world or jaekwon.land or whatever, and say import no land /p/ whatever code you want, and boom, you have it. The only we're also trying to define a license fee structure. So a portion of the transaction costs, transaction fees that are paid that use the virtual machine should pay back to no land, right? So there's that. But our IBC connections to other chains will not be for the purpose of what the Cosmos Hub is trying to do, but for allowing the virtual machine, the smart contract ecosystem to be used all over the place, including chains that use and support WASM.
So I'm a little confused by this. So let's say you have some code, some smart contract or program is on GNOLAN or NOLAN, and then there's another blockchain, and you said it could basically import code from there. So it means they would send an IBC transaction to NOLAN, and then NOLAN would send the code over, and then the code would run on that other chain.
Yeah, essentially there will be relayers involved too. Yeah, but other chains can verifiably download and use code hosted on NOLAN. Yeah.
So what's the benefit of that? Because if the code's on NOLAN, but then would the other chain need some sort of a VM or
it would need the same VM. Yeah, they would need to import essentially the same implementation, right? But as a module of the SDK. Yeah. So think of NOLAN as like a GitHub for NOLAN smart contracts, right? And any website, a Web 2.0 website you create, you can import from GitHub, and the tooling is transparent, so you don't have to worry about how it works, but it just works magically, kind of, right? So that's the same idea. You can import code from NOLAN as if it was GitHub. In the first instance, you'll only be able to import code, but in future iterations, you'll also be able to communicate with NOLAN, and there'll be interchain messages and also interchain state inspection. And what I mean is this: in NOLAN, the virtual machine Merkleizes the entire state. So all the memory, all the objects you create, all of it, they are part of the root Merkle hash. And so what this enables is it allows anyone to create a smart contract that creates their own IBC protocol, right? You don't even have to pass packets of messages between chains. You can just see what's going on. It's a difference between talking through words versus just seeing through body language, I'd say. But it'll open a new can of worms, a new world, a Pandora's box of IBC innovation, permissionless IBC innovation. And at that point, I would say there will be new versions of IBC that will just happen permissionlessly.
So let's talk about your constitution proposal that you've posted to GitHub and also on the governance forum that you've titled Atom 1. What's the motivation behind this document, and where does it fit in the context of prolonging the hub and ensuring that the hub remains relevant long term?
Mm-hmm. So when the hub was conceived, right, it was called a hub, and there was very explicit visual imagery of how the hub has spokes around it and how the hub is primarily solving for token transfers, and that's what was communicated. And we talked about how this system can scale to allow many transactions, new application transactions throughout the entire ecosystem, but still benefit from having the hub transparently, accountably tracking, where the tokens are. It was implicit because there was no constitution, but through various conversations and writings kind of scattered throughout. For me, the goal was always to basically create an alternative financial system, right? To create the backbone for an open, decentralized financial system, and that means trying to solve what Bitcoin's trying to solve, but going further to allow scaling, right? And not just Bitcoin, but any kind of token. And all right, so the thing that I didn't like about the Atom 2 proposal, more so about the way it was pitched, was that it didn't educate the people, the readers. It didn't educate the cosmonauts about the alternative, kind of default plan of basically, creating this base layer upon which, what I mean is, I think it's much better to double down on the original vision of the Cosmos Hub being a platform upon which new products and new innovations can be created permissionlessly. To the extent,
yeah. Well, so that's interesting. I think that the authors of the paper would argue that is the vision for Atom 2, that the allocator and the treasury that is used to fund new projects allows innovation to occur, allows new projects to build. Their interchain security is also a big component in bringing new projects to the hub that leverage security and leverage and that sort of benefit from the economics of hub security. That like the Atom 2.0 paper, I think, was written with this intention. Where do you think, like, it sounds from your view that you feel that they've got it wrong, or that maybe the long-term effects of what Atom 2 aims to implement will not achieve these goals?
Okay, so
yeah.
Well, one is, let's talk about the Atom token itself. Right. So what Atom 2 does is it turns Atom more into a money-like token, right? And this is a very different model than before. So that's why in Atom 1, I doubled down on the original idea for why Atom should be separate from other tokens, and clarify how it all works. And I'll talk about it. The thing about the hub, what's the main selling point of the hub? It's not just availability, scalability, but it's also security. We own this niche in terms of Byzantine fault tolerant consensus, like because we were the first to solve proof of stake, really, by utilizing classical BFD algorithms. And that's what drew people into Cosmos in the first place. Now, I think we should make sure we hold on to that niche. And if we lose it, I believe we will lose our identity. And people that were originally drawn to the system will leave for other systems that are able to maintain, that narrative. And in this sense, I think it's really important to keep the atom separate from a payment money-like token. And I'll explain why. You look at Ethereum, right? They've now converted to proof of stake. And as of the last time I checked, it was like 12% or so of ETH was staked in proof of stake. Now, imagine if Ethereum becomes like a dominant money form, right? Ether. Then you'll have all these people, a lot more people who hold ETH money, right? Who shouldn't be staking or delegating, because they shouldn't be in charge. They shouldn't be responsible for trying to secure the system, because they don't know much about security. I don't think everyone on the planet who uses money should understand who to delegate to ensure a secure system. I think that introduces politics and just politics into the system, and it turns the system away from skin in the game, security system into a political game, right? Of who has the airwaves. And people shouldn't make decisions that will get them slashed, right? Unless that's the game they choose to play, in which case, you should if you think you could be an expert in it.
So,
all right.
So you're worried that like Atom becoming more money-like thing would sort of undermine the security, because then more people would hold it who aren't like interested in staking or interested in or maybe too disconnected from sort of the actual governance and decision making. Is that your concern? Or
yeah, it creates an impossibility situation where you can't satisfy all the needs. Okay, so I'll continue with the example. Once Ethereum, say hypothetically, catches on to become greater than Bitcoin, and even multiple times greater, because it becomes the new financial system, right? It means either that the percent of stake, that a percent of ETH that is staked must drop significantly below 12% to like even less than 1%. Perhaps,
wait, what?
but very low.
I mean, that's
okay. Let's go into a little detour. I'll try to explain. Think about how much money there is just in the M2 monetary, system, right? M2 money. It's in the tens of trillions. Okay, and think of atoms as being like shares of Visa, shares of banks or the Federal Reserve. Okay, the market cap of Visa and these banks is much lower than the total monetary supply. Okay, so you can already see here that the percentage is very different. It's not 12%, it's much less. And the same thing will happen if ETH becomes money. So either the percent that is staked, to make these, to make consensus decisions and governance decisions will be very small, or it'll be very large. If it's very small, then it's insecure, because a bunch of whales with a bunch of money can just suddenly come around and stake their Ether and then take over the system whenever they want. If it's very large, if the percent of ETH staked is very large, it means multiple things. It means people who shouldn't be staking are staking, or it means the inflation rate to get people to stake is too high. So this becomes more of an inflationary system than it needs to be.
Well, I mean, I think if you take the Ethereum example, right, then of course what you're sort of missing here is the existence of liquid staking, right, which allows basically makes it very easy, right, for people to stake, but also to use their thing as a kind of money like instrument, right, to like stake the ETH.
I don't agree with you, respectfully.
In what
think,
aspect?
Okay, so in this aspect, I think that the utility of liquid staking, well, first of all, needs to be limited because of the systemic risk. And I don't think this is discussed enough, even though it is mentioned in the Chorus One interchain staking paper.
Right.
Yeah, it's very explicitly mentioned there, but it's not. People don't talk about it. They don't understand what's actually going to happen. Once we have liquid staking, right? People are then going to create services that incentivize people to put their liquid staking into that service, right? And this service is going to in a good liquid staking system, this giant pool can very well become the thing that controls governance of the original staked atoms. So it creates an incentive for people who have capital to come in and basically fuck the system, excuse my language, by creating another Luna-like situation. They'll make it beneficial for you to put your liquid stake in there, and then they'll use that power to then take over and destroy the original system.
So are you concerned by the risk of governance takeover? So essentially, just to kind of lay this out here, so you've got a liquid staking provider. Currently, in the way that liquid staking is set up, so you have staking shares, you move those into the liquid staking provider. They now have control over your stake, but the way that most liquid staking providers in Interchain currently are set up, they're set up in such a way that the users maintain their governance rights. So users are able to maintain governance rights over their tokens that are staked through this liquid staking service provider. So you're concerned that there would be some sort of a malicious takeover by these providers, or that this would be possible, and that they could essentially take over governance.
Yeah, I mean this is just one example of what may happen, right? And what's certain is there's not enough discussion of how to prevent these scenarios. A discussion of what are all the failure scenarios and how do we prevent it. It's I don't see enough discussion on that. The only place I saw this was in the Chorus One paper, but I think there are many other ways to exploit the system too. I mean which I can't even understand well because I'm not a financial derivatives guy, but I'm sure there are ways that people can describe better than I can. Here's another example. In the Quicksilver white paper, one of the major starting points is that, well, the amount that you can get slashed is only 5%. So 95% of the atoms are just staked and bonded without any utilization. And that's used as justification. But the fact is, we need to get away from just the 5%. There should be cases where 100% of the atoms are slashed. So it kind of, already, that assumption, which is already in the Atom One white paper, already kind of, nullifies that very foundation.
What would be those scenarios? What are some examples where you think 100% of atoms should be slashed?
Okay, when more than a third of the staked atom holders and the validators thereof participate in a complex attack whereby they fork the chain. Yeah. If you fork the chain, I mean, you participate in that. Yeah, you should get slashed entirely.
But that would happen anyway. I think in such a scenario, right? I think people would basically do a hard fork and actually.
Right. It would
I mean,
happen anyways, but
yeah.
but what it does is that destroys the original assumption around liquid staking, which, you know, because of the violated assumptions, would have huge repercussions.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're, you know, like you're totally right. Right, when we wrote this research paper, and for those who don't know, basically, at course one we wrote in like 2019. We think a lot about liquid staking, right, and think a lot about, you know, the different risks, and we wrote this paper on there, which maybe you can link to. And yeah, we were thinking a lot about these different issues. And of course, this discussions happens even today to some extent in Ethereum, right, where people are worried about Lido, and you know that basically with the success of Lido, that you almost start having this kind of other layer of control over the Ethereum network, which ends up being like, you know, the Lido governance and the LDO token. So I think there's definitely been discussion in Ethereum about this. And, you know, when we were working on like kind of designing the Quicksilver ideas, we did want to preserve some of the features of the Cosmos staking model, in particular that people choose their validator and that people can participate in governance, because a lot of liquid staking systems, you know, they kind of lose that, you know, because you're putting your tokens in and then there's some separate process that chooses the validator, and you know the governance is kind of like you can't exercise it anymore. But of course, you're still right that I think liquid staking does open up different risks and attack vectors, and I agree with you. I think there's not enough discussion about it, but I guess the challenge is also that it's really hard to understand what are the risks, which ones are likely, how could they happen, and at the same time, I think you just have a big pressure, or you have a big incentive, you know, for liquid staking to happen, and I think it's kind of widely seen as something that's inevitable because it has those strong benefits.
All right. So okay, here's one criticism of the Atom 2 white paper. If I understood it correctly, it seems like what it's saying is, okay, well, you can already do interchain staking with interchain accounts. So non-native liquid staking, you can do that through liquid interchain accounts. But it says then that we should also create a native way to do liquid staking. And you know, I guess the presupposition, the assumption is that that will limit the amount of liquid staking through interchain accounts. But I don't think that's true. I think interchain accounts is already powerful enough that you can try to do whatever else you want on the hub, but the interchain accounts is already flexible enough that, you know, people will, you know, it will not, the native solution will not limit the non-native solution.
I mean, my understanding of the goal of this native liquid staking solution isn't to limit the usage of interchain accounts, but it's actually to accelerate liquid staking adoption by allowing people to liquid stake without having to go through an unbonding period, for one.
Okay. Well,
because I think the sort of, you know, the larger thesis of the Atom 2.0 paper, which I mean, there's a lot of things I like about the Atom 2.0 paper. There's some things I'm like less sure about. I think this idea of like Atom becoming kind of like this widely used money, I'm not sure about it. But I think the idea is that, okay, you want to get a lot of people move their atoms to liquid staking so that those liquid stake tokens can then be used, you know, across this interchain economy, and that this way, you know, Atom becomes more established and more integrated and more valuable.
So I want to say 2 points here. One, and then, you know, okay, just 1 point to complete this thought for me, which is, so going back to what I was saying with interchain accounts, I think we need to, because of the systemic risk, we must limit how much is staked through interchain accounts. The Atom 1 Constitution proposal includes a system to limit the amount of staked atoms through interchain accounts by you know, imposing a bit of a tax on using that system, 5%. You know, and this should be adjusted to limit it, to make sure, say, the total amount of interchange staked atoms, say, is like 25% or something, you know, something of that nature. It needs to be explicit. Now, going back to kind of the bigger picture, a lot of what we want through a liquid staking really, I think, is solved by creating the Photon token. Okay, so for example, the Photon token, is it first of all, like this atom to photon burn that is proposed in the Constitution. It resolves the issue of atom inflation that people are worried about. Like, why are we creating people? And I am too. I'm in the same camp. Like, this is way too much. 20% of atoms being inflated towards experimental treasury systems. Like, okay, well, with the atom to photon proposal, people have a choice to voluntarily burn their atoms to get photons. And what the photons will do is allow people to stake them. The photons can be staked for interchain staking. It's also used for transaction fees. It's also used for, it's basically the, everything people wanted in everything people wanted about atom to be, non-exponentially inflationary is provided for you in the Photon token, right? Because the Photon token does not inflate exponentially. And so, just about everything you really want in terms of liquidity should be resolved and solved by the Photon token.
So the idea of the Photon token would be that, like, you can burn atoms and then you get Photon tokens, and then you can go the other way around as well. You can burn the photon and get the atom. No?
So the what's proposed, and this can change, is for it to be one way only and for it to be a one-time event, over a period of 3 months, right? And this is better than forking the atom distribution, mirroring it to create the Photon token, because it allows people to choose whether they want to participate in this Photon experiment or not. Yeah, and
what's the point of this token? So now you have a double token, but like, what's the point?
The point is that it is more like a money token than the atom is, right? The atom, like I mentioned before, should be thought of as shares, right? General partner shares of IBM, of Visa, right? And going back to, I'll just reiterate. Because even the market cap of what Visa is like $400 billion, quite a lot. But if atom were to become money, that amount, $400 billion put at stake by a bunch of whales collectively in order to take over Cosmos is like an easy deal, right? So by having this atom photon distinction, it creates a barrier, right, that allows the system to remain secure despite a bunch of whales trying to take over the system all of a sudden, right? So
okay, I think the concern would be here that one is atom has like a known brand, it's listed on exchange, it is like there's a lot of weight behind it, right? So the idea of like, and it's already used to some extent a little bit in this kind of interchain economy, and now you sort of trying to accelerate that, whereas a photon, like, that sounds like, okay, it would just be some new token that but like, why would that become
yeah, well, okay, it's like, right, why would people care? Well, I mean, if we see that this is a better system because it preserves security and it creates a token that is the token to use for interchain staking, so already has utility not only for transaction fees across zones hosted by ICS, but also bonding.
What do you mean with interchain staking?
What I mean is, okay, I wrote this in the Atom 1 Constitution, so I'll just briefly summarize it here, right? But the whole point of the atom is to ensure that 2/3 of it are staked, the majority, supermajority are staked, right, for securing the Cosmos hub, right? So it's starting with the assumption that the Cosmos hub in this system is the most important thing we want to secure. So we create a wall around it by separating it from money, right? And ensure that 2/3 are staked, because that solves the security problem that I was mentioning, right? So your question was Photon token. Why? Okay, so now if we what interchain staking is trying to do is it's trying to create a whole marketplace of many, many blockchains that are secured, right, ultimately by the Cosmos Hub. The problem is if you use atoms to secure and to be the stake behind all of these other blockchains that are secured through ICS, it already nullifies the security that we're trying to create by the separation. Because if, for example, if only 10% of the atoms are staked, right, for the Cosmos Hub, and then the other 90% are staked all over the place on other blockchains, well, how do you differentiate between blockchains, interchain secure blockchains that are just there to earn inflationary atoms, right? And then all of a sudden they're going to unbond from these zones and then stake back in the Cosmos Hub and take it over, right? So what you have to do is you have to make sure 2/3 of the atoms bonded are all bonded on the atom on the Cosmos Hub, right? Yeah. And by allowing them to be not bonded on the Cosmos Hub but being bonded elsewhere and still earn inflationary atoms, you already destroy that original thing you want to preserve, that invariant. So what we need for interchain staking ultimately is for it to be bonded, staked by tokens that are not inflationary and it's not atom, and financial institutions already do this. If you want to create a financial service, company, you have to bond a certain amount of dollars, right? You don't bond your shares. That would be weird. I mean, if you had to bond, your shares in Visa or something, or shares in your company or whatever, it would just make this thing so much more complex. Bonding in a more of a monetary token would be a lot more easy to understand and evaluate, right?
One of the things I was thinking about here is how does Atom maintain its value? Because currently, Atom has staking utility, but it's also kind of used a little bit as a money, but here the atoms remain staked, and I guess we haven't talked about the supply and sort of the inflation of atoms through staking rewards, but long term, what is the incentive for atom holders to remain staked long term rather than selling their atoms and moving them somewhere where they have better returns?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons why you want to stake your atoms. It's because you not only earn whatever's happening in the Cosmos Hub, transaction fees and whatnot, right? You also earn a constant supply of photons being paid to the staked atom holders. So if Photon succeeds, Atom succeeds. So there's an incentive for all the atom holders to be promoting the Photon token. And also in the Constitution, there's a proposed way to take a portion of the revenue for interchain staked zones that are staked by photons to pay a portion of that back to the staked atom holders as well, right? So through Atom earned transaction fees on the Cosmos Hub. And by the way, here's another thing that I haven't even mentioned. There are other ways, that the Constitution could be amended to allow more blockchains to be secured by Atom and not the Photon. And this is really easy to do if you just say, besides the Atom and the Cosmos Hub, there will be more. There would be 10 whatever n number of other blockchains that are all secured by the same validator set. That's very simple, easy to understand, and all of those blockchains can earn transaction fees being paid back to the Cosmos Hub to the staked atom holders. But anyway,
but the value of atoms. So if Photon becomes the primary utility, the token that has the most utility and velocity of money and usage, and staked atom, my atoms are just staked there, and they're not doing anything. Do you think that the value of Atom will continue to accrue? And if it doesn't, if the value of Atom drops significantly, then the attack vector becomes, well, someone just buys up all the atoms OTC from Atom stakeholders, or somehow buy up their private keys or something. Basically, you could buy up all the atoms in the system in order to take over the chain.
Well, the feedback mechanism, the
I guess it's the
integration.
feedback mechanism that I'm not understanding.
Okay, yeah. So okay. So what's proposed is that forever, 2% of the genesis amount of photons, right? So that constant fixed amount of photons forever, every year, be inflated to the staked atom holders. So already, because of that, if photon succeeds, atom succeeds. But also, initially that will be relevant, but as time passes and there are many ICS staked zones and blockchains, a portion of the rewards that go toward the bonded photon holders, right, that are securing those ICS zones, should go to the staked atom holders. So there is essentially a royalty fee payment kind of system that always feeds back towards the atom holders. And let's say this portion is initially, let's say this royalty fee, tax, whatever you want to call it, is say 25%. Okay, so 25% of the revenue being paid to the validators that are chosen through photon staking goes to the staked atom holders. That already means if there's enough photon secured zones through ICS, then the price of the atom will be greater. The market cap of atom will be greater than just about any other ICS secured zone.
I mean, I feel like the flaw with this a little bit is, so when you look at Interchain Security right now, then there seems to be pretty good traction, right? In that there's real interest from different projects that want to use Interchain Security. Why do they want that, right? Because the Cosmos Hub has a secure validator set. It has a big amount of value that's being staked, and that's kind of slashable and guaranteeing the security. Because the chain has been around for years and has functioned well, and they want to kind of leverage that, right? So I think the idea of saying okay, we're using the Atom Cosmos Hub validator set, we're using Atom as the staking token for Interchain Security and to secure these other chains, that seems like a very straightforward and logical way for the Cosmos Hub to sort of offer its security and sort of validation services to other chains and monetize it. Now, I think if you say there's another token that's being staked, I mean, I think, first of all, I think that would not have the same appeal. I think the other issue here is actually, even if you take a little bit of step back, right? I think Interchain Security actually seems to be pretty far, right, and going pretty well, and it's of course not designed with another token in mind. Now, I guess you could launch something, right, that uses another token, but I think that's not like a discussion. Even when you had all this white paper discussion, right, there's a lot of discussion around the Atom 2 white paper, but I think this hasn't been something that I feel like has really been on people's mind much at all.
Yeah, well, that's why we're here. Okay, so like in this model of ICS that you see happening, right? Who are the validators? Are there more validators in the core Cosmos Hub validators, or only the Cosmos Hub validators?
I think initially it's the Cosmos Hub validators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So okay, there's definitely room for expanding the Constitution to allow a special case of interchain security that uses atoms, like I mentioned before. Here's kind of the problem. The distribution of atoms of voting power in the validators is wildly different. The top validator versus the bottom validator has just orders of magnitude difference, right? So here's my follow-up question. In this interchain staking system you're talking about, do the validators volunteer to participate in interchain security, or does everyone need to participate at once?
I think in the beginning, everybody needs to participate.
Okay, so this is the exception I was talking about. The simple model of interchain security where the entire validator set is participating in other zones. Okay, I will edit the constitution to add this exception. For that case, absolutely, the Atom token can be used for interchain staking. Okay, the problem is once you deviate from that and you have interchain stake zones that are that allow for voluntary, then it becomes impossible to ensure that there's any sane Nakamoto coefficient, right? It just becomes very difficult to ensure that. You can also so that's the problem with deviating from everyone has to participate in simple replicated security. The problem there's another way to do this with the Atom token where you can say, okay, well, you can use atoms to stake on the Cosmos Hub validator set, or you can use atoms to stake on interchain security on these other blockchains. This was also discussed before, and maybe it's not being implemented right now, but surely it will come into people's minds later, right? And the problem there is what I mentioned, right? That now you have atoms like 90% staked elsewhere, 95% staked elsewhere, only 5-10% staked on the Cosmos Hub. And this destroys the invariant that we're trying to preserve, which is that 2/3 of the atoms are staked in the Cosmos Hub. There is room to create solutions that try to mitigate all the problems we've discussed, including ensuring that the Nakamoto coefficient is well preserved in interchain staking. And I do think we should explore those. And I think I made a mistake in the current draft, the Constitution, to not add these. Okay. But what I'm describing with the Constitution is an additional, a different kind, an alternative interchain staking system that requires the PHOTON token really to work.
Okay. What are your thoughts on mesh security, and how do these considerations play out when zones are securing other zones bilaterally? Do these security concerns hold up at that point?
I think mesh security is inevitable, right? So I do believe that eventually you'll have all these different hubs essentially that are securing each other, right? And I don't know to what extent. The only problem I have with that narrative is that it's not sufficient. As in, if we're to choose between a hub and spoke model for Cosmos versus no hub but just a bunch of meshes, just a mesh, the hub is better than just a mesh system, is what I'm trying to say. So you can have the hub and spoke model with mesh security with other hubs. You can have both, but if you don't have blockchains that function as hubs, then you have a problem. Okay, the problem is that at some point, always there will be issues where a blockchain fails, and people are going to want to recover from this failure of the blockchain through manual means, by judging, by looking at what actually happened and determining, okay, we should all recover this way, right? The hub is where that the recovery decision should be exercised, it should be enforced through a singular place. If you don't have a singular place that is where this decision is delegated to, you've got n number of blockchains that all need to act in the same coordinated manner, and that's basically impossible. So yeah,
but isn't that just up to the market in the end? I mean, you can't force chains to build on the hub. I mean, of course, like the hub will push for chains. It will do like business development for chains to build there, but people are building their own chains. People are building roll-ups. People are building whatever they want, and it's not a given that things will kind of emerge in a hub and spoke manner.
Well, we can learn from history of what has already happened in the failures of the financial system, and create a system that learns from that history, or we can relearn the same mistakes. So yeah, I mean, yeah, if we just ignore the past and let the market build, and then yeah, we won't have hubs perhaps, and then there will be a failure that cascades the entire ecosystem, and then people will say, "Holy shit! Like a bunch of these blockchains failed because of cascading issues. We need a hub." You know, so we can go that route.
No, I mean, I agree. Like things, I think there are a lot of examples in nature and markets in sort of human coordination where things exist in a hub and spoke like way. And, you know, one thing is like air travel, and the other is like the internet, right? Like the architecture of the internet is essentially a hub and spoke kind of like a network of hub and spoke like architectures. And so maybe the market would just naturally form in this manner, but it's not like it's not a given, like I'd say.
Well, you know, all we need to do is, you know, if the assumption, if the premises are true, you know, and the conclusions are true, then we just have to communicate it, and we just have to, you know, to show people this is why, and then the savvy investors, the savvy you know, creators will understand, and they will naturally choose, you know, a solution that has already thought of these issues. You know, the problem is when we disagree internally and we can't agree on what the vision is, right? Then, you know, we can't do that. But that's also the reason why we need a constitution that lays out what is the design, you know, which, you know, the reasoning can be written in the Constitution, but I think it can be implied through commentary, right? And so it could be separate. But you know, I'll just, you know, that's one reason, because it allows us to be coherent about, you know, what we are building, which solves the problem that you mentioned. The other thing is, look, there's going to be omnibus, you know, large changes being proposed like Atom 2 all the time. You don't want to be refuting or criticizing or, you know, pushing back against proposals, you know, every single time, right? It's much better to have a constitution where you can discuss the vision, the North Star through the Constitution, and then later to say, anyone can then say, wait a second, this proposal doesn't meet the requirements of the Constitution. It allows us to free our mind space, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the Constitution is a scope within which we can have conversations. But I argue this, and so the charter that was written and posted to the forum, I argued that charter should have two things. It should have values that are objective, but we recognize that those values are not enforceable on chain, and then it should have rules, and those rules should be only enforceable on chain, and anything else basically, like in such a document, has no value. If you say something like, oh, atom holders should do this or validators should do that, if it's not enforceable by chain on chain, it literally adds no value to this sort of document in the context of a blockchain. But if you want to talk about values and what
okay, so I'll disagree with you, and here's why. Okay. The value system in the Constitution system, you know, the values enforced by the Constitution allows you to have a Byzantine fault tolerance against any number of people who are trying to subvert the original values. And what I mean is, you know, even if the Cosmos Hub were to violate its own values with a bunch of actors who are, you know, quote unquote hostile, right, to the original values, right, as in a hostile takeover, and succeed in taking over, right, it would still give, because of the, you know, the openness and transparency of blockchain and token distributions, it allows anyone to then create a different fork, well, you know, comprised only of people who abide by the values, and that is anti-fragile. You can't stop that.
Yeah, no, I hear that point. I just think that, you know, since values can change over time, you know, we'd be in a situation where we'd be constantly like updating constitutions, and I guess like that's possible. But
Well, you know,
values should be
and
pretty
also
stable.
other people can enter the system that don't necessarily, because it's an open system. And I think that one of the values should be kind of credible neutrality and resistance to censorship. And if you have people who enter the system that don't necessarily adhere to those values, like, look, there's lots of people on the internet that have different values. They all use TCP/IP. They all use like the underlying technologies of the web, even though they don't share. They don't fundamentally share the same values. And I think that blockchain should strive at something similar.
You know, the way to solve that was the platform. The way to solve that was the platform originally proposed by the Cosmos Hub, to allow anyone to create any blockchain, even connected to the hub, that can function as a hub itself, that has different values. So, you know, in that sense, I see the desire to change the nature of a hub from its original design into more of a, I would say, more of a centralized thing, is itself, you know, that's what bothers me the most about it. Is the hub already provided the platform to allow you to create your own experiment. You know, why are you so intent on changing the nature of something and creating existential risk when it wasn't necessary in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I think back to sort of the beginnings, right, of Cosmos, and there was this idea of the Cosmos Hub. So my my understanding of that was at the time that with IBC, okay, you can have like direct connection. You know, chain A can send an IBC packet to chain B, but that this was kind of problematic for one reason, right? That let's say you now have some token that lands on a chain, but it comes via a different route, you know, that then it's basically like not a fungible token. And, you know, other things like you have to have way fewer connection, right? Let's say there's like the Cosmos Hub is connected to like 100 chains, and, you know, some chain just connects to the Cosmos Hub, and all of a sudden they're kind of indirectly connected to all these different chains, and, you know, that like upgrades would be easier. And so there was, I think, a bunch of reasons given why this sort of idea of this IBC routing hub was powerful, and why the Cosmos Hub would fulfill that role. I think what we have seen is that hasn't happened, right? Instead, we've basically had, I think today, right, all of the IBC transfers are, you know, just between two chains, right? We don't do this kind of routing through another chain. And I think as a result of that not happening, there's been kind of a question, okay, but what's the Cosmos Hub good for? Like, why does it exist? And I think we've had Interchain Security, right, that has been kind of brought up as like, oh, this is something the Cosmos Hub can do. And that kind of makes sense, right? But it's quite different from what was the original Cosmos, the original vision, you know, that was in the original white paper. And then there's like, you know, other ideas, I guess, where people are like, oh, this is what the Cosmos Hub can do. This is the role atoms can play.
So I want to ask you, Jae, like, where you see the overlap between Atom 1 and Atom 2. And this is a question that's been coming up in the comments. Where do these two proposals overlap, and what is, let's say, like the compromise that that's possible here?
Yeah, you know, I mean, we already made one compromise just in this discussion regarding interchain security through atoms. And thank you for that. I'll update the Constitution. You know, from my perspective, I definitely want the Constitution. I want a Constitution that preserves the original values. Whether or not it will pass, you know, we'll see through governance. I want to see the governance happen, right? I want to see who's for it and who's not. I think that just seeing that would be very powerful. I suspect it will pass despite everything, which I think a lot of people might be surprised by, but I still suspect it will pass. What I want is for Atom 1 to pass first, you know, but okay, what I want is for Atom 1 to be modified through these conversations to address all the concerns of Atom 1. And then I want it to be addressed in such a way that what we want in Atom 2 can be accomplished in, you know, within the framework of Atom 1, right? So then I want Atom 1 to pass, and then I want the modified Atom 2 to pass as well. If that makes sense, right? Just as long as we have a constitution and we can secure the original vision and, you know, solve all of these, you know, and preserve all the qualities that we want, you know, with all the justification, it allows people to understand, you know, what is the utility of the atom? Why does it make sense? You know, why do we need a photon? As long as people understand, you know, through a constitution document like Atom 1, then I think we will be much better off no matter what we do.
What's the likelihood, do you think? Because I mean, I've been following the Atom 2 discussion and then started following this discussion, or at least like your proposal here. I don't see a whole lot of conversation happening between those two groups. Maybe I'm missing those conversations, but it feels to me currently that the dialogue, there's not a whole lot of dialogue, or that dialogue doesn't appear very constructive. Is that a good representation of what's going on?
Yeah, you know, honestly, it seems like there are two sides to this story, right? There are people who want Atom 1, and there are people who want Atom 2. You know, and there's a mix too. Yes, sure, but it does seem like there's not enough conversation between the two, and I attribute that to, honestly, the divergent visions of Atom 1 and Atom 2. And you know, so it's a tricky situation. I do think that there needs to be more conversations around, you know, around both. I've asked questions on the Cosmos Hub forum that, you know, last I checked wasn't answered, for example. I'm happy to answer any questions by anyone, but no one's asking me questions from Atom 2, really. And or if they have asked, I have answered, but the conversation hasn't continued. Yeah, well, we will see what happens, right?
Why do you think? I don't know. Were you consulted, or did you at all? Like, your name's not in the Atom 2 paper, but at any point when the authors of this paper were writing it, were you consulted or asked your opinion or any of this kind of thing?
No, nothing at all. Nothing. Yeah, you know, there's this narrative that, like, you know, I haven't been, you know, contributing anything. I haven't been involved in Cosmos or development, et cetera, et cetera. It's, you know, to some extent true, because I've been focusing on no land, right? But like, the reason why I got out of all the politics and discussions in the first place was because since the very beginning, you know, from my perspective, there was a coordinated effort to remove me from conversations because people, you know, thought I was difficult or whatever, because we had a difference of vision. And this is the honest truth. You know, and I have tweeted about it, but whatever, I don't want to dwell there, right? But this is my perspective. I've been excluded purposefully because of whatever reason. Honestly, I think we're all being manipulated. I think there's a lot of manipulation going on of all the actors. So I don't blame anyone individually. I don't ascribe anything to any particular person, but I see how we're being manipulated. I see what the general direction of things are, and I see that so in that sense, you know, I've been.
Who do you think is doing this manipulation? Like, who?
Here, okay, so
this is the spicy part, but yeah, who do you think is manipulating?
Okay. Look, there are people who are hurt because of my behavior, right? I was, you know, like I'm almost like too unyielding in some sense from the perspective of others, because I have a particular version and I want to see it executed, and every time, you know, it deviates, you know, whatever. And sometimes I'm not always available because, honestly, before I was doing so many things, right, and just getting burnt out. I couldn't do everything on time, you know. But on the other hand, I get it. I'm not always the most available, and, you know, those are valid criticisms, right? So maybe people are really upset about that. I get it, but I don't think it you know. All right, here's what I think is going on. The thing that you're alluding to, right? Okay, these are facts from my perspective, and you're free to disagree. But look,
we're here to hear you out, man.
All right. JFK was assassinated after he said that there is a monolithic, ruthless conspiracy that operates in the dark. Okay. Senator McDonald This interview is not even, it's not even easy to be found. It's censored. You're going to have a hard time finding it, but it's linked to from the Adam 1 Constitution. He literally called out specific organizations, including the Rockefeller Foundation, 1970, and said there is a conspiracy to very slowly introduce a global world order. Literally said New World Order. Now, what we have experienced through COVID, now if you look hard enough, you will see it, the facts are already out there that Fauci, when he was head of NIH, funded the EcoHealth Alliance and, funded this gain of function to engineer, COVID-19 or COVID-19 like viruses, but if you listen to the whistleblowers, such as the ones, retweeted by Kim.com and even before, right? It's pretty clear that it seems like EcoHealth Alliance is the one that created COVID-19. Okay? So the COVID-19 was engineered, and then they came in and started enforcing mandates. Now, which organization, if you look at which organization altogether has been most vocal in the lockdowns, where the head of this organization boasts about having infiltrated Canada's cabinet, and Canada was really locked down. Where you see the members are the ones who are enforcing these lockdowns, like Gavin Newsom in California, right? And Trudeau, right? Even Fauci, okay? Where they say, where they want, not just the vaccines, right, mandates, but they want digital ID, right, and central bank digital currencies. Where, look, it's like this organization has been pushing global control grid for a long time, and they've been executing it, and they've even been boasting about it. It's all out in the open, okay? So, if this group as a whole was able to stop the world through their vaccine mandate with the virus that they probably engineered, right? What are they doing in blockchains? Because that's the other thing they're interested in controlling. Where are they? Well, I see hints of it. Before I joined back as CEO of AiB, this company was tweeting support for the World Economic Forum. I don't know where that came from, but I just see enough signs of it. Like this company, gosh, while I was tweeting all these things, God, look, I'm not going to go into the details. All right, I'll just say there seems to be something going on more than what meets the eye. All right, and given the the facts of the matter, right, that they've even stopped the world. I mean, it's not surprising that they are swarming all over this place, because Cosmos was the first to solve proof of stake, and the Adam 1 Constitution is the thing that is the alternative to the financial system and the antidote to global control through central bank digital currencies and digital IDs, right? So it's not surprising that they would have all their focus all over this place. So I'm not saying it's 100% true. I'm just saying, what if it is true? What are the chances that it is true? Just consider it. Don't brush it off. I'm not ascribing it to anyone, but what if it is true? And that explains what's going on. We should be wary of it. We should consider it.
So, some of the things that came up. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
No, I mean, I just wanted to sort of, because you're saying things, and then there's some aspects where I'm kind of in agreement on some level, right? I mean, for example, you look at something like CBDC. I mean, this is very clearly something that's being promoted. I mean, in the end, what is it about? Right? It is about creating tools for some kind of totalitarian control. And I don't believe there's some sort of colluding explicit organization coordinating all this. I think it is more something that governments just have this natural tendency that they go towards more rules.
They
more
certainly
control.
have a habit of doing so.
They have a habit
they got a
of
bad
doing
habit
so, right?
of controlling people.
And then of course it doesn't, was COVID created in a lab or not, it doesn't even I mean, maybe not, right? But in the end, like that kind of thing, like what is the reaction to it, right? The reaction to it is, okay, we've got to like control this thing. And then once you have some tools of control, right, they extend. And I think blockchain very much is, about building, an alternative. But yeah,
Look at 1970s. Senator McDonald talked about the Rockefeller Foundation and the New World Order and a very slow takeover for a globalist state. His plane got shot down days after. You look at the Rockefeller Foundation, and just look up the lockstep scenario. They put out a pamphlet with 4 scenarios, and the first one, the lockstep one, which they published before COVID came out, is exactly pretty much what played out. Okay, just consider these things. I mean, okay, is there no conspiracy? I mean, the UN, the would-be global government says there's no conspiracy, but that's pretty funny, isn't it? These entities exist. We know that secret organizations exist. Freaking the United States was founded by one. Did you know that before George Washington, there were other presidents in the Continental Congress? Some were even Black. George Washington was not the first one, but we've been educated to forget the other things.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think my sentiments echo those of Brian when it comes to this stuff. It's like when it comes to like COVID, for instance, I do think that there isn't well, I think my opinion changed about this over time, right? I think like at the beginning, certainly I think a lot of people were in a very cautionary kind of stance. And over time, as we got used to the mass, like the ways in which we could protect ourselves from COVID, vaccines, etc., I felt that there was a lingering amount of control, where at least where I was living in France, that was unnecessary, like too much control. And like I got frustrated about this all the time. But I feel like it is just a function of states that they tend towards control more so than sort of this kind of idea that there are nebulous organizations that hold the strings, like, the puppet strings, the proverbial puppet strings.
Have you seen the McDonald interview I mentioned?
No, I don't know who that is.
Okay, well, Senator McDonald, look it up, 1970. The thing is, you can't even find it. You can see for yourself that there's a censorship regime when you try to look for this video.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe touching on this, and I'm bringing this up because so many people asked me to bring it up. And like, when I went into this interview, when I went into doing the research, I didn't know that this was a thing. And so in the comments, in the tweets, people shared this GitHub repo, which I'm certain you know what I'm talking about. I'd like to give you an opportunity to maybe to ask you how you feel about what people are saying regarding this GitHub repo, and what you want to straight about this?
Yeah. Okay, so right. So Jacob Goodikian has been posting files from a repo that I shared with him a long time ago. There's a README file, a root README file in the docs files folder that explains why I put the files there. It says very clearly that I don't condone any of these. I don't. They're provided as is. Here, I can literally read it for you. Second. CD. These files provided as is. They were the ones I had saved from my research. I cannot attest to the veracity of the information. I do not condone hate or violence. If half of what's here is true or relevant, then Jesus is the way, and the time is now. A time of reflection and repentance, else followed by the words of Allah. Allah, by the way, is also Aramaic for God. May he have mercy. Remember, The last great war showed that hate doesn't work. It's yet another triumph for Jesus. That was the disclosure, and there was another document too that I could read, but it says basically the same thing. These files are what are shared in the fringes in conspiracy circles. We can censor them and pretend like they don't exist, or we can try to learn what the conspiracy theorists, what kind of theories they're talking about, and help them dispel, falsehood, so that we all come to a conclusion about what is actually true and what is happening. Otherwise, we're just forever going to be divided into camps, and we'll be fighting ourselves without understanding why. Right? So that's the harm of censorship, and that's what's going on today. The reason why No Land is being created is so we can have a censorship-proof discussion forum where we can actually, experiment with ways to distill truth from all these crazy theories, right? And if there's any truth to any of those things, then we should, consider what to do about it. But we shouldn't just ignore it and shame people for sharing these things, especially the way that it's been done out of context. And calling me a Nazi? What kind of Nazi says, can you imagine Hitler saying, I'm a spiritual Jew, and I support love over hate, and we shouldn't condone hate? Does that make any sense? No.
What do you mean when you say that you're a spiritual Jew? Because I've seen that tweet, but I don't know what it means.
Okay. Well, what it means is you believe, you believe in a higher being, you believe in purpose and the spirit that this higher being is trying to, give us. You believe in, adherence to truth. You believe that humans are flawed, right? But that we can listen to the words of the past that are distilled to help us and guide us. The word of truth that was distilled through the past, as much as, Genesis of the Bible is hard to believe. I don't think that's really relevant, because it's really more about, the evolution of our understanding of the greater, world and the greater universe. And the difference between the Old Testament and New Testament is really what I mean when I say, trust in Jesus. Okay. Hope that answered your question. It's about, there's a difference. Okay. And I'll just kind of go over this because this is not, super relevant to any of the things we're talking about. It has to do with my faith, but I'm happy to share it. In the Old Testament, whether you go to heaven, or whether you're saved, whether you're, where you are in the world and after, depends on what circumstances you're born into. Okay. Whereas in a New Testament, right, it's more about what you believe and how you act. All right. It turns an exclusive system into an open system, and allows anyone to participate, as long as you can change your mind, think different. Right. The reason why the Apple logo is an apple bin, and the logo was think different, because it's because of that. We should all be able to change our minds about what should happen about the world. We should see that this globalist system that is trying to take control is not working in our favor. We should see that we should be able to forgive people, and understand them, give them a chance, right? No matter who you are.
Cool. I think that was a nice way of, coming to this.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you clearing some of that up, and at least setting your record straight from your perspective. I think a lot of people will appreciate to hear that, and I think some people will probably also want to take this and use it against you. Some people will use it in your defense, but at least it's coming from your mouth and not someone else's.
Yeah, well, happy to be part of some controversy. I think out of this, ultimately, there will be good. It'll be painful in the beginning as we go through this stuff, but I think what will come out of it is more light than anything else. Thank you for the platform.
Yeah, I wanted to maybe talk about one thing briefly, because I think I saw it mentioned in some of the chat here. I saw it also mentioned in in the discussion, forum discussion in like many places, which is basically about what about the ICF and the funds of the ICF, and should the ICF fund be used for that? So I mean, you can provide maybe a little bit of context here, since for those who don't know, I'm on the board or the council, the foundation council of the ICF. So basically, like, the ICF does have a substantial amount of money, and almost all of that budget is going for like Cosmos core development. There's things like Tendermint, Cosmos SDK, IBC, Interchain Security. Basically, those kind of things is kind of where the budget's going towards. It's definitely true that transparency is inadequate of the ICF at this point, right? And not enough is published about how the money is being spent. This is something that's been, kind of like a work in progress. I think a big challenge has just been that there's a lot of chaos that's been had been going on, like understaffed team, and I think the executive team was kind of very lacking, and so there were a lot of issues that basically just meant that there was like so many issues to deal with that, like, doing proper transparency is kind of like the foundation just hasn't done a good job in, and I think that's definitely something that will get better. So I just wanted to basically, like, okay, where does the funding go to? It basically goes to those things, with the vast majority. And so I think, for example, if you look at the Atom 2 and this treasury thing, like, the ICF wouldn't be able to like fund such a thing, even if we ignore like the legal challenges that there might be with it, without having to cut back on a lot of the funding for core development that's happening today. So I do think that when it comes to, for example, if people want something like the allocator, or where you have basically a large pool of funds that's like controlled by governance and like deployed in this way, I think the only sensible way to do it is through, some kind of inflation mechanism, right? Whether that's changing the community pool tax, or the way it's proposed now, to basically have governance vote on minting atoms, and then putting it into some other governance mechanism. And I think there's obviously a lot of questions about how would the other governance mechanism work, and how would it be controlled, and like there's obviously going to be a huge amount of work that needs to go into that, so that people feel like this is comfortable and done in a good way. But I just wanted to provide this context here.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. That's a really important point. Okay. So, I think the inflation, should go to the community pool, if any, right? I think some inflation makes sense, but it should be part of, okay. It should be part of a white paper that describes various things you want to do. Yes, that's true. But I don't think it should be the Atom token. I don't think we need it to be the Atom token. I think the amount proposed, first of all, was way too high. And now there's some consensus that, okay, that number needs to change. Sure. But look at the Atom 1 constitution proposal. We don't even have to inflate any atoms. Okay, first of all, here's a point that I want to mention that I forgot to mention. Part of the reason why there was an initial atom, inflation was to fund for various things, but also it was part of a story to create a deflationary token, right? So I've been saying, okay, we shouldn't think of it that way. We should focus on keeping 2/3 bonded on the Cosmos hub. And even still, even though the inflation rate is exponential today, what the Atom 1 constitution does is it allows the inflation rate to go to 0 and even negative. Okay, because if there's enough revenue being earned through staked atoms, too many people will bond, right? So it might even be like 80%, 90%. Well, we need to bring that back down to 2/3, 67%, for there to be a market of atoms. So the inflation rate might even go negative. Okay. All right. So that's the Atom story. Going back to the Photon token, we're creating a new token, and we have an opportunity to create inflation of a certain amount of those tokens going to going to the common pool, right, without violating any prior, social contract, implicit or explicit regarding the Cosmos Hub. We have a chance to do this. Why not take it, right? So the Photon token, after Genesis, 20% of what is created through the burn will be inflated and go to the Cosmos, will go to the common pool. And from there, we can use governance to use those tokens however we want. So I think this addresses the points that you were referencing. But you also said something. You said, yeah.
I had maybe a follow-up question here, and that is related to AiB and NewTendermint. So in the last months.
Oh, sorry. Can you put that on hold for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, regarding the ICF, right? Okay. Yes, it's true that the ICF it can't do certain things, right? And it's going to be hard for it to do certain things, sure. But even if it can't put money in a DAO, right, and allow the blockchain to do its thing, even if regulations don't allow that, what we can do is go ahead and create DAO systems, accountable, transparent DAO systems that that function with roles and missions, right, and that allows people to make decisions and keep people accountable. Even if it doesn't have any money to spend, it can have essentially proposals for how to spend that money, and it can allow the ICF to be the ultimate token holder with veto power, right, on the Cosmos Hub. And this is laid out in the Atom 1 Constitution. It allows for any DAO system to function however it wants and be official DAOs, treasury DAOs of the Cosmos Hub. And it also allows for there to be an M of N address, which can be comprised of Interchain Foundation members, where they only release funds if they believe that the decision, the proposals ultimately proposed by the DAO are good, right? So this should be able to unlock a whole bunch of the tokens in the ICF if the ICF should agree to do this, and allow us to see how decisions are made transparently, so anyone can see the transparency of it and to be able to make suggestions. And also, the narrative here is that the ICF is funding for different DAO systems and user experiences. We need to do a lot of that in order to create any complex DAO system. If we want really anything to do with, if we want Atom 2, we need this in the first place anyways, and we're not there yet. So why don't we focus on allowing that to happen? And here's a way to do it with the funds of the ICF.
So the question I was asking was related to AiB. So for context, so AiB is the company that operated the Tendermint team. So it was like branded as Tendermint, but the company was AiB. In the last year, it was rebranded as Ignite, and then it was announced later that the Ignite team would kind of fork off as its own team, and that a new company, NewTendermint, would come into existence, or at least a new team operated under AiB. Now, since then, a lot of the team that was previously working at Ignite was laid off or allowed to leave or asked to leave, and so that's I think it's for context here. So AiB was also allocated the same amount of atoms as the ICF. It was 10%. So this was in the founding documents, in the Genesis documents. What do you plan to do with these atoms, and how can they also be used, say, like, in a way that helps propel the hub forward?
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, if you look at the plan document for the Cosmos Hub fundraiser. It shows that the Tendermint is given atoms that unlock over 2 years, right? And the reason why Tendermint is because Tendermint by that point had already created Tendermint core and a white paper and all these things. So like it's more like Tendermint already earned it by that point. It's the ICF in the plan documents that you see that has a mission, it's given atoms for a purpose. It's also the ICF that is a stiff tongue, a foundation, not a tax deductible nonprofit foundation, but its mission is nonprofit, right? So it's the ICF that really should be answering these questions and being transparent, whereas arguably All in Bits, this company, this for-profit company, should be free to do whatever it wants. But I'll be transparent about this. I'll let you know.
Sure.
Yeah, the Ignite team is going to spin out as Ignite, right? It's going to be its own company, and there's a mechanism of funding to enable to ensure their sustenance and for them to succeed in doing their thing. Now, I don't want to say too much about what they're doing. You kind of know what they're doing with the right, their projects that allow for anyone to launch a new chain using their dev tools, right? NewTendermint likewise is spinning out, right? So Tendermint, the brand and the IP, will go to NewTendermint for to be managed by this entity, which is also going to be the steering entity behind NoLand, right? So the IP that was developed for NoLand is being contributed to this NewTendermint company. But the majority of the funds and the atoms that remain in All in Bits, which by the way is now called All in Bits again, officially, business name wise, will go back to the shareholders. It's got shareholders. It's got shareholders with very different ideas of what needs to happen, and it's time that we create. We split into bits, right? And we give shareholders their due, which is what they want. They really want to see their atoms. So this was a compromise that was designed after we had to have a reduction in force because there was a huge crash in the Cosmos atom token. Right.
Okay, so shareholders of All in Bits will essentially be kind of like given paid atoms in proportion to their share, their stakeholding, as though it was some sort of dividend, but receiving basically dissolving those atoms out into the shareholders.
Yeah, for more than for the majority of tokens. Yes, yeah, exactly. There will be more token distribution events like we had already before.
Okay. Well, we're almost at an hour and 45 minutes here. We are very thankful for you staying this long with us and being so open and forthcoming. One final question that was asked here in the chat, and I think is a good question to end on, is what's your vision for the success of Atom? And maybe a follow-up to that, or if you could add that in there, is where does GNO fit in all of this? So if Atom 2.0 moves forward, let's say, what will become, like, where will GNO live? Will it live as an ICS chain? Will it live as its own chain? Will it aim to be a competitor to Atom? What's your vision here?
For me, success for Atom looks like the Cosmos Hub adhering to its original vision of providing token transfers and scalable token transfers, for itself and many blockchains that connect to it. Being, as minimal as possible, as reasonable, right? But still allowing for innovation to happen permissionlessly around it, right? Without it plausibly becoming another, federated government with its own, Federal Reserve. Not another one of those things that are too big to fail, right? But rather a foundation upon which, if you have a better idea for a hub, if you want to innovate upon, and create something new, then it becomes launch pad for new hubs to emerge, new zones to emerge, right? So this sort of big bang upon which variations can occur permissionlessly, right? including a lot of the things that we want in Atom 2. But fundamentally becoming the thing, the network, the root of the network that becomes the thing that is used to buy your coffee, right? For my parents to buy a coffee, it'd be amazing if they can use, all the software that we created, whether or not it's on the hub. Probably won't be on the hub, but will be on an ICS zone. Even if it's not on an ICS zone, if it's on an ICS zone that is secured by a hub that is derived from the Cosmos hub and connects to the Cosmos hub, that's a success. Right? With regards to NoLand, it's not trying to solve the same problem at all. It's trying to be like GitHub for GNU smart contracts. So it's not competing with the hub in that sense. It doesn't want to solve that problem because it's got enough problems of its own, right? And it has its economic model of its own through IP license fees. But it will also connect to other chains, for the purpose of enabling the GNU smart contract, virtual machine, and ecosystem, right? So will it be hosted by ICS? The root chain, probably not for a while, unless it becomes, solid and there's a clear need to. But I think we have enough of an economic a picture, an economic model for it to not require it. So we'll see. I'm open to it. I just don't think it's something that's priority. But there will be for sure ICS. If ICS succeeds, there will for sure be ICS secured zones that are running NoLand smart contracts in the NoLand VM that also connect to NoLand and pays license fees back to it and imports code and so on. So I see a symbiosis between a financial backbone and an application backbone. And I don't think NoLand is going to be the only one. I think there are so many other languages where we can create something like NoLand, right? Every language that is going to have its own niche, of users, so they will all be separate, systems.
Cool. Well,
yeah,
thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing all of that.
Yeah, thanks for allowing me here on this platform, and it's been a pleasure. And looking forward to the next one in a few years, right?
Well, maybe not in a few years. Maybe we need to have these conversations a bit more often.
For sure.
Thank you, Jae, for joining us today and for being so generous with your time, being also open about some of the tougher questions that are not always easy to address. Also, thank you, Brian, for joining me as a co-host here on the Interop. Very happy that you also stuck around.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and hopefully we can do this again sometime too. And thanks to all of you for joining the Interop. We were consistently about 130 people in the live stream, so I think it's probably one of our most successful live streams so far. If you like the work that I'm doing, please consider subscribing and tune in for new live streams every week. So we'll see you next week.